What's up, you fantastical weirdos, and welcome to the Weirdoverse. I'm your host, JD Ross, and you are tuned into Weirdwide, your favorite digital cult. I do apologize for missing a week last week. Sorry about that. If everybody was looking forward to the episode, did not deliver. Unfortunately, that is my fault. It's just one of those things. Sometimes there's, a little bit of, mental illness, just even gets me, man. It just drags me down a little bit. And, so I decided to take a week off, worked on some of the background stuff that I've been neglecting. So you'll actually be able to see the fruits of all those labors soon enough. If you go to the new official website for Weirdwide, www.weirdwide.com, there you can find every single episode that's ever been released. Working on some other stuff. By the time you guys are hearing this, I should have some of the other stuff up, like some of the things to help support the show. There's a buy me a coffee section. There's a Cash App thing, just different things like that. Eventually I'll be putting a Patreon up, even looking at some merch options down the road. So I am pretty excited that Weirdwide does have a new home on the interwebs. So go check that out. Like I said, you can check out every episode that Weirdwide's released. You can subscribe and get episodes sent directly to you. It's fucking awesome. So check that out. I think it looks pretty cool personally. So go check it out. Let me know what you think. If you like the new design of the website, email me at weirdwidepodcast@gmail.com. But enough of that. You didn't come to hear me talk about how great the new website is. You came for the weird, and the weird I shall deliver. So today we are diving into a dark and twisted time in the medical field. A time that seemed like a giant horror show when it came to medicine. It was the time of the lobotomy. Now, before I drive an ice pick of weirdness straight into your brain, let's check in with everyone's favorite little disembodied alien, Larry. Larry, what do you think, my friend, about lobotomy?
After spending time on this rock you unevolved monkeys call home, I'm kind of at the point where I think we need to bring lobotomies back.
Oh, so you're pro-lobotomy?
Your species is straight up dumb. A lot of you need to have your brains messed with.
A controversial opinion, to say the least. But, is Larry wrong? WeirdWidePodcast@gmail.com. Let me know what you think. All right, that's enough of that. Let's get all of you out there in weirdo land lobotomized! All right, so let's start off with, what actually is a lobotomy? I feel like it's one of those things where, everybody has heard the term before, maybe not sure that everyone really even totally understands what's happening with a lobotomy. I would say most people know that a lobotomy has something to do with your noggin, has something to do with your brain, and some doctors doing some fucked up shit in it, and that's true. So a lobotomy is a surgical procedure in which the nerve pathways in a lobe of the brain are severed from those in other areas. So basically, you're cutting off parts of the brain to other parts of the brain. Doctors would perform this procedure on people with conditions such as schizophrenia and depression. And at the time, there just wasn't any other effective or widely available treatment for those conditions. This was a weird time. This was, they didn't really, they knew a lot, but they also didn't. A lot of the modern advancements that we take for granted today just weren't available. Now, lobotomy was extremely dangerous. This is there's no joke here. While of course I would say that I'm no medical historian, so I don't know. I mean, if I do feel like the lobotomy as a thing does fit well into where we are now. We had to go through that process to get here. But literally think of the most horrific medical setting in the modern era, almost cartoonishly over the top terrifying. Think insane asylums and mad doctors, shit like that. Doctors that didn't seem like doctors, but more more like Victorian era villains, it almost comes off as. Now, lobotomies rose to prominence at the end of an era in medicine known as therapeutic nihilism, which is a period throughout the 19th century where doctors were under the assumption that most of the ills that patients suffered could not be treated at all. They literally were that can't be done. Imagine the implications of that. It's just this weird culture of completely checked out doctors. Hello there. I'm Dr. Nihilist. We understand that you've come in today to see us about your broken arm and possible insanity, and we would just be tickled pink if we could help you with those ailments this fine day. Unfortunately, we are unable to treat any ailments at all, so hopefully the broken arm is not your dominant, as it will remain broken for the remainder of your days. As far as your insanity goes, you'll be just fine. Unless, of course, you become annoying to those around you, at which point you'll be promptly placed in a straitjacket and thrown into a rubber room where you won't be able to bother good normal folk who've had to put up with your nutty behavior. That'll be $5,000. All right, look at that. I don't feel like we haven't debuted a new character for a while. Just totally off topic here. I should have mentioned this up top. This is actually our 30th episode. So yay for us. Golf clap for us. All right, back to lobotomies. So how was a lobotomy actually done? So in what seems like the most insane mad scientist procedure that I've ever heard, the lobotomy was done by literally drilling 2 holes into a patient's head and then originally injecting pure ethyl alcohol into the prefrontal cortex, which, like, I'm not a doctor, but like I just feel like shooting pure alcohol into a dude's brain probably not going to be that good for him. I don't know though. What do I know? I don't have a degree in medicine. Don't listen to me about, I don't have a fucking degree in medicine, so don't listen to me about anything medical. If I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, legitimately. Like when it comes to that, like as far as doctors go. Now, the lobotomy was later upgraded, so to speak. They would still drill the 2 holes in your noggin, but then they would use an instrument similar to an ice pick called a leucotome. Lobotomies were originally called leucotomies. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that. I'm probably butchering that. Like I said, we truly take modern medicine for granted in society these days. Like this was at one point touted as like a miracle medical procedure. It's not like all the centuries leading up to this were any better because they weren't, but this is still just like this was like, after all that, this was like, wow, like we're getting somewhere. Like we're drilling holes in people's head. Like check that shit out. Yeah, let's get on that train. Okay, so at this point, we've drilled holes into a living, breathing human's head. What were we going for at this point? And the main purpose of a lobotomy was to try to medically calm a patient with a variety of mental illnesses: schizophrenia, manic depression, bipolar, mania, which was actually mania was just kind of a catch-all term that was later like reclassified as bipolar disorder as medical science advanced beyond this nonsense. So like literally we're talking about like things in that we talk about in the modern age where like someone's got like extreme depression. Their idea at the time was, well, if she's depressed, we'll just draw 2 holes in her head. The patient is extremely sad. It's time to drill holes. All right, now you got to remember here too, like they're going in and they're fucking with the prefrontal cortex, which is part of the brain, from what I understand, that controls executive functions such as planning, decision making, working memory, personality expression, moderating social behavior, and controlling certain aspects of speech and language. So this isn't like a minor part of the brain that they're just going in and stabbing. They're like literally taking certain things away, like your actual like personality and how you express it is going to be affected through this procedure. Now, historically, patients of the lobotomy were immediately following surgery, often in a stuporous, confused, and incontinent state. No shit. Some developed an enormous appetite and gained like a ridiculous amount of weight. Like some people got like bottomless pit, and they just fucking ballooned the fuck out from everything they were eating. They just could not, like, their brain was not sending the right signals to actually stop eating. Another complication that was really common were seizures. This was like extremely common after the surgery. And there was also kind of an emphasis on having to like retrain patients in the weeks and months following the surgery, like retraining them sometimes in everyday use. There are some examples where people regress back to like extreme childhood and they had to be retaught how to like tie their shoes, how to use a fork, different things like that. Not surprisingly, many patients died due to the procedure. The many that survived showed a lot of negative effects, like inability to function independently, decreased initiative, and a total detachment from society. None of that surprises me at all. Like this just seems like, yeah, if you go in and you mess with the brain, that's the kind of effect you could have on somebody. Doesn't surprise me at all. One of the doctors who we're going to be talking about here in a little bit, who was extremely prevalent in the field, called the procedure surgically induced childhood. That's some fucked up shit. Okay, so who first decided to lobotomize. So the original doctor, who is credited as the pioneer of the lobotomy, is a Portuguese neurologist named Antonio Igas Moniz. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. I hope I did. Now, a lot of doctors dabbled in the ballpark of lobotomies leading up to it, like a guy named Gottlieb Burckhardt. He kind of dipped his toe in the late 1800s, or is it 1900s? 1888. 1888. And some of the American doctors tried it on chimps, but it wasn't really pioneered until Antonio in the mid 1930s. Antonio Igas Moniz is a truly creepy bastard. Like, everybody who's watching on YouTube, you can see, they got a picture of him up here. But it's just like, if you're just listening on Apple or Spotify or something, like, look this guy up when you get a chance. If you're driving your car, don't do it right now. Like, wait till you're parked. Like, it's not that important. But like, look this guy up, Antonio Igas Moniz. Creepy looking motherfucker. Like, he looks like exactly the type of creepy, like older like era doctor that would suggest something like a lobotomy. Like, that looks like something we should do. We should cut into the brain. What do you think about cutting into the brain a little bit? Now, Moniz wasn't able to actually do the procedure himself, as he actually was affected harshly by gout, which I do understand. I've had that myself, and it's no fun. Never had it in the hands, though. That sounds like it would suck. Apparently, Moniz had it in the hands. I've had it in the foot. I've had it in the elbow one time. That's a weird fucking situation. Like, honestly, I've eaten entirely too much, like, shrimp and shellfish and crabs and sometimes beer throughout my days, and it's no fun. Do not get the gout. Don't get the gout. So I do feel for this guy. He's not able to really go in and do it himself. That shit is debilitating. Like I said, I can't even imagine that in your hands, dude. Ugh. So he enlisted the help of a surgeon named Pedro Almeida Lima to help him with the actual procedures. He would kind of direct him, and Pedro would go in and do it. Good for Pedro. The surgery, like I said, consisted of drilling 2 holes in the patient's head and then injecting the pure ethyl alcohol into the prefrontal cortex. At the time, when they first started this, it was considered a major success, since there appeared to be a reduction in the symptoms of severe paranoia and anxiety that the patient had suffered prior to the surgery. So they weren't wrong. It was kind of a success considering what they were going for. They were ultimately looking to remove the symptoms the guy was showing, and they seem to have done that. So, yeah. I mean, golf clap for Moniz and Lima. Yeah. So Moniz and Lima subsequently performed the operation on a small subset of patients, refining the procedure as they went. What can we do better? Through that process, Moniz created a instrument called a leucotome, designed specifically to disrupt the tracks of the neuronal fibers connecting the prefrontal cortex and thalamus of the brain. Is everybody with me on that? We're going to disrupt the tracks of the neuronal fibers connecting the prefrontal cortex and thalamus of the brain. Who'd have thunk you can come to this weird ass podcast, right? And you can get a science lesson. Wasn't even part of the plan, but you got a science lesson. How much fun is that? How much fun is that? Can I get a hallelujah? Moniz and Lima operated on nearly 40 patients by 1937. But the results were mixed. A lot of the patients were improving, but a good amount were showing no change in symptoms, and others were even relapsing. So like, they were going through this horrific procedure that one person at one point has described as, because someone who survived it, they asked how it felt, and it was described as a broomstick handle being pushed through your brain and splitting your skull open. So some people literally went through that process for no fucking reason. Just literally to go back to being anxious, mood swingy, whatever the problem was that people had. Despite all this, the practice was soon widely accepted, largely because there were very few therapeutic measures available at the time for quieting chronically agitated, delusional, self-destructive, or violent patients. This was literally just about like people being annoyed at people who were having symptoms. Like, like people who had like severe schizophrenia, because it was a horror show for medicine and for mental health at the time. People were working on it, but it's nowhere near the awareness level that we are today. This is the 1930s. So, they're literally just like looking for a way to quiet some people down. Like these people that are just like that would be considered loonies or just like crazy people. They're just like, we need to quiet these fucking people down. What if we stab them in the brain with an ice pick? But like clinically, that's literally what happened here. So while Moniz and Lima pioneered the process, it wasn't until Walter Freeman and his colleague James Watts got involved with the whole thing that it was improved, so to speak. It was adopted and perfected by American mad scientists, like I said, Walter Freeman and James Watts. Watts didn't stick around very long. He didn't seem to agree with a lot of Freeman's methods. From what I understand, though, Walter Freeman thought that Antonio Moniz was an absolute genius. Like he saw this procedure and fell in love with it medically. Like it was like this is what I'm meant to do. Like so he jumped on board and went right to work. Apparently Watts had some issues with like some of the early stuff, like early planning and things like that, where he was like there was like a lot of like a non-sterile environments, and Watts was like this is too much for me. I don't like this. So Watts didn't last long. He did participate a bit, but he didn't last long. Freeman was actually the one to refer to it as the lobotomy. Originally, like I said, it was called a leucotomy. I'm not pronouncing that right. Leucotomy. I don't know. Lobotomy sounds better. It does sound better though, doesn't it? Like it's like I think that's like Watts or Freeman seemed to have this like kind of weird understanding for marketing, at least this very niche situation. He immediately went to calling it a transorbital lobotomy. That sounds better. The use of the lobotomy, like that Freeman was pushing, it was originally like, very resisted, very criticized by American neurosurgeons, but Freeman managed to like promote the success of the surgery through the media. So Freeman did this like media campaign where he's like touting a lobotomy as this like miracle procedure, which captured the attention of the public, obviously. So, he kind of did like understand branding, at least for the lobotomy, which, you know what? I mean, like that's pretty wild. This guy like literally just like coined and just like almost, this guy is the guy behind the lobotomy, basically. So Freeman streamlined the procedure in which a pick-like instrument was forced through the back of the eye sockets to pierce the thin bone that separates the eye sockets from the frontal lobe. Fuck, that sounds horrific. The pick's point was inserted into the frontal lobe and used to sever the connections in the brain, presumably between, like I said, the prefrontal cortex and the thalamus. In 1946, Freeman performed this procedure for the very first time on a live patient who was subdued prior to the operation with electroshock therapy. Let's talk about shock treatment here. That was one of the main things that they would do here is it's electroshock. Like again, this is another one of those things that like falls under like almost cartoon like as far as like an actual procedure, like, but you got to actually stop and think this was a real medical procedure. They didn't used to knock you out with like anesthesia and an IV, like, you're going to just go nicely to sleep and we're going to operate. No, they literally would they would put two fucking things by your ears and shock your fucking noggin. And you would basically, what it would do is it would like send an electric shock like current through an electric current through your brain, and it would cause a brief surge of electrical activity and would make your brain literally make you go into a fucking seizure, and then it would be just zap and operate. That's literally like that's a real thing. Shock treatment used to be a real actual use for anesthesia. How fucking insane is that? Freeman's method was done very quickly, sometimes in less than 10 minutes. It was used on patients with relatively minor mental disorders. That's another reason that Freeman got, as kind of notorious as he did. A large amount of the procedures that he performed, because he did a lot of them. He did thousands of lobotomies himself. He either like did them himself or supervised in the time that he was active with this, and a lot were for really low grade shit. It was very questionable stuff. Large proportion of lobotomized patients exhibited reduced tension or agitation, but also showed other effects like apathy, passivity, lack of initiative, poor ability to concentrate, and a generally decreased depth of like intensity in their emotional responses to life. So, like, literally making zombies surgically, like these, like, just imagine just the most checked out you've ever seen a person. That's kind of what they're going for here. Now obviously, like the original procedure, some died because of this style as well, but those effects weren't very widely reported, and at the time when they were doing it, they were just going for shit, but long-term effects were largely unknown. Lobotomies were performed on a wide scale during the 1940s, like I said, with Freeman himself performing or supervising more than 3,500 lobotomies by the late 1960s. The practice did gradually fall out of favor starting in the mid 50s when like antipsychotics, the antidepressants, and other medications started that were much more effective in treating mental illnesses started to come onto the market. And that's pretty much where it is. It pretty much fizzled out from there. Like it was like for a while longer there were some holdouts, but like mostly it became almost overnight a very obsolete procedure, and then began to be kind of made fun of on its own with in cartoons and media, different things like that. Lobotomy became almost a joke. There were some famous cases though. One of the most interesting I found was Rosemary Kennedy, because even the rich aren't like safe from this miracle procedure. This was the Kennedy's oldest daughter, the Kennedys as in JFK. She was apparently very difficult to control, especially after living a few years abroad. When she came back, they said she was a bit of a different person. She'd have mood swings, or she'd fly into violent rages and just start attacking anyone who got in her way. She was kicked out of a summer camp for her behavior, and she only lasted a few months at a boarding school because of all this stuff. So Joe Kennedy, the family patriarch, the one that put RFK and JFK in power positions eventually, was way more concerned with shame and embarrassment that Rosemary was bringing, and decided to have her lobotomized. Like, this is legitimately, this guy looked at his daughter and said, "This bitch is too much of an embarrassment. We need to settle her the fuck down." And some doctor was like, "Have you heard about a lobotomy?" Now, Rosemary was 23, and Papa, this should piss you off. If this would piss anyone off. Papa Kennedy had the procedure done without telling Mama Kennedy until after. So like he literally took Rosemary and was like, "We're gonna go to we got a random appointment here. It's just a checkup or some shit," and they literally lobotomized her. The lobotomy did not go well, with Rosemary actually regressing to the mental state of a 2-year-old. She couldn't walk or speak intelligently, and she was incontinent. And they literally just kind of disappeared her. Like, they threw her into an institution for the rest of her days. And her siblings, like JFK and RFK, they didn't even like know what happened to her for like decades. Like, the public found out, 20 years or so later, but like most of the family didn't even know what had happened to Rosemary, and she just spent her life in an institution, just like talking like a 2-year-old and shit. It's just crazy. Like, that's one of the most powerful families ever. And like, look at that. I mean, like, the curse of the Kennedys is so true. I mean, nothing good happens to anyone in that family. Like, Rosemary, like, legitimately just got fucking, like, got her head fucked with and then just sent away when they couldn't deal with her. It's fucking insanity. Another crazy one is this guy named Howard Dully. This one's wild because he's actually still alive. He was 11 and he had a stepmother who seemed like a bit of a ball buster. His stepmom, Lou, she was described as cold and demeaning, and did not like that Howard would leave candy wrappers around and daydream sometimes. She was just like really annoyed. Like, she did not like Howard, from what I could tell. He was often beaten and abused, which, not good. And then one day, the father and the stepmom took him to see Dr. Freeman. Howard described him as warm, personable, easy to get along with. Like, definitely didn't get like a threat vibe from him. But Freeman ultimately diagnosed Howard with schizophrenia. And at 1:30 p.m. on December 16th in 1960, Howard was wheeled into a operating theater and given a series of electroshocks to sedate him. That was about as much as he remembered. He woke up the next day feeling like a zombie. His eyes were swollen and bruised. The procedure cost about $200, and Howard was not only the youngest ever person to receive a lobotomy, but also to survive. And you wouldn't expect it. He's actually doing pretty well these days. He's gone on to be a best-selling author, writing his memoir, My Lobotomy. So, good for Howard. That's crazy. I can't. I'd love to read that book at some point. Definitely got to check that out and see what that's all about, because that's got to be just like the most fucked up shit, man. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine it. Luckily, lobotomies are a pretty distant memory, with a few occurring into the 1980s, but there really was a period of history where the lobotomy was considered a medical miracle. As mad as the world is today, at the very least, we don't have to worry about a doctor wanting to shove an ice pick into our skull and just hoping for the best. So that gives me a little bit of comfort. So, yeah, that's where we are with that. Well, thanks for getting weird with me. Don't forget, like I said up top, check out the new website. It's www.weirdwide.com. Like I said, you can check out all the episodes that are available. You can subscribe. Make sure you get episodes sent directly to you, plus news that I have updates and things like that. You can get all of my socials. And there's going to be a lot more. Eventually I'm going to have character bios for the different characters of the Weirdoverse on there, different things like that. So check that out. Let me know what you think. You can email the show at weirdwidepodcast@gmail.com. You can also get me on Instagram and TikTok at dudistweirdo. So follow me on there, shoot me a message, leave me some love, let me know what you think. Don't forget to tune in next week for more weirdness. And until then, keep it weird.